there, it's Mrs. Nelson. Welcome to day 2 on parts of the heart. Yesterday we talked about different blood vessels. We talked about the arteries and arterioles taking blood away from the heart, carrying mostly oxygenated blood with the exception of the pulmonary artery. We talked about veins bringing blood back towards the heart, carrying mostly deoxygenated blood with the exception of the pulmonary vein, and the capillaries that do the gas exchange between each individual cell. Today we're going to talk about parts of the heart, and this should be a review from grade 8 science class. So the heart is a muscular organ about the size of a fist. So if you make a fist right now, that's about the size of your heart. It's located in between your lungs, behind your sternum, which is your breastbone. So if you take your fist and kind of put it behind your sternum, just to the left of your sternum, that's approximately where your heart would be in your chest. Your heart has 4 chambers, and the heart's covered by the pericardium. So this is a kind of a thin tissue, or almost like a skin, which secretes a small amount of lubricating fluid, so there's not too much friction as the heart's beating. The human heart can be considered 2 separate pumps, divided into the left and the right side. The right side of the heart pumps blood only to the lungs, while the left side of the heart pumps blood back to the rest of the body. So if you take a second and think for a minute, which side of the heart is going to be larger? The right side that does a little circuit to the lungs and back, or the left side that does pumps blood all the way up to the top of your head and all the way down to your toes? Because don't forget, the heart is a muscle, so as we work muscles, they get bigger. So the 2 smaller chambers on the top are called atria, or singular atrium. So they're located on the top of both sides of the heart. These are referred to as the left atrium and the right atrium. The larger 2 chambers are called ventricles, both at the bottom of the heart. So they're called the right ventricle and the left ventricle. The left ventricle, so here's the answer to the question I asked you on the previous screen, is much larger than the right ventricle because the right ventricle has to pump blood to the lungs, while the left ventricle has to pump blood to the rest of the body. The left side and the right side of the heart are divided by the septum. So if we look at this picture of the heart right here, I'm just going to get a pen for a second. This is the septum right down the center. Oops, it's not working. This is the septum and it's down the center. Now this is a little bit counterintuitive. As we look at the heart, this side of the heart, as we're looking at it, is on our left, but it is actually the right side of the heart. And this side over here, you can see the thick wall here, this is the left side of the heart. So when we're looking at the heart, the sides are almost like opposite. This is because we label the left and right side of the heart like they're in our chest. So if we were to kind of flip this around and put it in our chest, the left and the right would be labeled like that. So that's a little bit confusing, so I hope that that kind of helps. Inside your heart, you have several valves, and there are valves between the atria and the ventricles. So the valves are called atrioventricular valves, and these control the flow of blood between the chambers. So these are just like the valves we saw in the veins. They prevent blood flow. So the valves only go one way, so the valves would allow the blood to pump from the atria into the ventricles, and then they would close so that the blood cannot flow back into the atria once it's in the ventricles. If it doesn't close quite properly, that's called a heart murmur. The valves are supported by strong fibrous strings called chordae tendineae, and these strings prevent the valves from inverting when the heart contracts. So if you've ever had like a Gatorade bottle that's got like a valve at the top, it looks kind of like this peace sign that I've got up here. Oh, that I just erased by accident. Sorry, I'm on the wrong thing here. This peace sign. I can't seem to get off there. This is what the valve would look like, in that it can only flow one way. The atrioventricular valve separates the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it's called the tricuspid valve. It's got 3 flaps or 3 cusps, just like the one I just had on the top right here. This is a tricuspid valve. Oops, sorry, because it's got 3 flaps. The left atrioventricular valve that separates the left atrium and left ventricle is called the bicuspid valve because it only has 2 flaps or 2 cusps. It's also called, if you're a fan of Grey's Anatomy, they will call it a mitral valve. So if you're usually in kind of on TV or at the doctor's office, they might call it a mitral valve repair. They're talking about that bicuspid, that two-flap valve between your left atrium and your left ventricle. Each ventricle also has a semi-lunar. So semi means half, lunar means moon, because they look like half moon valves between the ventricle, so the ventricle itself, and the artery that it pumps blood into. The right ventricle has the pulmonary semilunar valve, and the left ventricle has the aortic semilunar valve. So just as a friendly reminder, anything that's called pulmonary has to do with the lungs. So whenever you see pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein, pulmonary semilunar valve, it's headed out to the lungs. This is versus cardio. So anytime you see that word cardio, that has to do with the heart. So we're going to look at the heart and kind of go through the pieces, how things go in. So I'm going to scroll down in a second, and I'll give you a minute to put, you can pause the video to put them on there. I'm just going to talk about how the blood comes in. So deoxygenated blood, so I'm actually going to use a blue. Oh, no, it's not changing. Sorry. I'm going to use a blue pen. Deoxygenated blood comes in the superior and the inferior vena cava. And they come in to the right atrium here. So that's the deoxygenated blood returning from the body and heading into the right atrium. They're going to go past that tricuspid, that three-flap valve, into the right ventricle. And then from the right ventricle, it's going to go past the pulmonary semilunar valve and out the pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary arteries are the only arteries in the body that carry deoxygenated blood. Your body, because there's no pumps in your veins to pump the blood back towards the heart, your body relies on those valves and the skeletal muscles we talked about yesterday. However, it can't pump directly to the lungs. There's not enough pressure, so it goes back to the right side of the body, and then the right side pumps it just to the lungs, where it gives up its carbon dioxide, picks up oxygen, and then it comes back to the body via the pulmonary veins. So those pulmonary veins are the only two veins in the body that carry oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood is going to enter the left atria. It's going to go past that bicuspid or mitral valve into the right ventricle, and then it's going to go out the largest artery in the body called the aorta. So the aorta is going to pump to all the different arteries, taking blood up the top to the head and then down the bottom to the rest of the body. So I'm just going to scroll down, and you can pause your screen here so you can fill in the rest of those. I guess the only thing I didn't talk about was that septum, that part that divides the left and the right ventricles. So you might want to hit pause here now so you can fill in these into your notes, and then we're going to carry on. So we're going to talk a little bit about the path of blood to the lungs. This is often referred to as the pulmonary circuit. So blood that's low in oxygen, so on our diagram I used blue because that's usually how we signify blood that's low in oxygen. It's called deoxygenated blood. It enters that right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava, or the body's largest veins. Superior vena cava is coming from the head and the arm region. The inferior vena cava is coming back from your feet and lower part of your body. Heads into the right atrium. That right atrium would contract, forcing the blood through the tricuspid atrioventricular valve and into the right ventricle. The right ventricle then contracts, and it sends blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve to the pulmonary trunk or pulmonary artery. The pulmonary trunk then divides into the pulmonary arteries, which take the deoxygenated blood to the capillaries in the lungs, where the oxygen diffuses into the blood and the carbon dioxide diffuses out. This blood is now oxygenated. Once the blood is oxygenated, it feeds back into the pulmonary veins, which take blood from the lungs to the left atrium. The left atrium then contracts. It forces blood through that bicuspid or mitral valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle contracts, forcing the blood through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta. The aorta is the body's largest artery. The aorta then divides into smaller arteries, which carry oxygenated blood to all the body tissues. So here's just kind of an outline of the heart and those different circuits that the blood would travel. So here's the vena cava coming into the right side of the heart. And then, oops, you can't see where I'm pointing at. Sorry, I'm going to get maybe just the pointer. Here we see the vena cava. No, hang on. Here's the vena cava. It's coming back into that right side of the heart. Then that right side is pumping blood out to the pulmonary circuit via the pulmonary artery. Again, that one's special because it's the pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body that carries deoxygenated blood. Then it's headed to the lungs where the oxygen is diffusing in and the carbon dioxide is diffusing out. Then that freshly oxygenated blood is coming back via the pulmonary vein, and the pulmonary vein is special because it's the only vein in the body that carries oxygenated blood. And then this is the left side of the heart. It's going to pump blood via the aorta to all the different parts of your body. So if we look here, part of it's going to pump to the upper part of the body. Part of it's going to pump to the liver. So that's the hepatic vein and hepatic arteries. It's going to pump to the stomach and the intestines. Renal has to do with kidneys, so it's going to pump to the kidneys. And then it's going to pump to the lower bodies as well. And then all of those would do gas exchange with individual cells at the tissues. That's what that's showing there. And then it would all go back via the respective veins into the vena cava. I hope that helps. You can go ahead and carry on with the task in your booklet, which was to label the heart on part C. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me by email, by phone, or on the Teams chat app. Take care. Bye-bye now.